Because one thing we do complain about is there not being enough research in women's health. So we should be hunting for them when they come out, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And we're going to give them to you so you can hear them too.
Listen, when there's a new banger, when there's a new systematic review, I'm reading it.
When that new review hits.
When that new
when
review
it drops,
hits, that new drop, that new good.
Then we're going to bring it to your podcast listening station.
Absolutely.
You're listening to The Pelvic Freak Show
with your hosts, Amanda Neary and Hannah Meyer. Hey, Pelvic Freaks. Welcome back to another episode of The Pelvic Freak Show.
Where you're freaks for us and we're freaks for your pelvis, baby.
I kind of like that you started doing that where you like cut off my last word.
I think it works.
It works well. It's almost like a pre-recorded thing at this point. Welcome back, guys. If you were here last week, we might need a win today. I don't know. We tried a new concept and we don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened last time we were crashing out.
I liked the concept of it. We basically went a roundabout way of talking about things that we hate. We went about it by saying positive things about them. So it was almost like backhanded compliments. But this week, we are getting our research hats on and we are analyzing new research about labor and delivery, which is super exciting. Anytime I see new research in the pelvic health realm, I get super stoked because we already don't have enough, right?
Yeah, we don't.
And this is a systematic review. So the article we're going to be reviewing came out in December 2025. It was published in December 2025. It was submitted for review in June. So this is a recent article. It's from last year. Systematic Review and Network Meta-Analysis. It's called Maternal Positioning in the Second Stage of Labor and Its Relationship with Perineal Trauma, a Systematic Review and Network Meta-Analysis. This is an article from Spain by Ladderas Diaz, Rodriguez Almagro, Martinez Rodriguez, Picon Rodriguez, and Hernandez Martinez. So I'm basically going to summarize it for Hannah, and then we're going to comment on it together.
Yes.
She read it too, but it's just easier if I'm basically explaining it to her so that we can kind of walk through it for the listeners too. The reason we love systematic reviews, first of all, is because they are the most comprehensive type of research because they have a very intense inclusion process and exclusion process, right? They're looking at all of the research within these search terms that they come up with. And as someone who's done a systematic review, even coming up with your search terms takes weeks and weeks to really hone down your topic and find all of the articles that those terms elicit when you type them in. Yeah. So from there, they end up with usually like around 1,000 articles. And looking at all of their exclusion factors, they're taking into account the most comprehensive randomized controlled trials. So those are usually single or double blind trials that test an outcome against a control. So in this article, they were looking at birthing positions as the control. So basically, supine is their controlled position, and they tested other positions against that to see if the risk of every single type of perineal tear, so first degree, second degree, third and fourth degree, and episiotomies was reduced by certain birthing positions, or if there was greater risk. Yes, Hannah.
I raised my hand. So if you guys have delivered a baby before in a hospital, you know that you're mainly pushed to deliver on your back. And if you have delivered at, I don't know, a birth center or done like a home birth, you know that the experience is very different. You have a little bit more freedom to move around. You can deliver in multiple different positions versus in a hospital, you're kind of confined. And that's why we find this research really interesting because in a pelvic floor PT clinic, we see a lot of patients preparing for delivery, and we teach the benefits of different positions. We teach the benefits of different styles of pushing. And sometimes when we teach a patient, like, hey, you can deliver in hands and knees, you can deliver in sideline, and then they go to deliver a baby and they're like, I was not given that option. And that's been told to us plenty of times. So we have a lot of patients that come to us saying, is it better to deliver on my back? Is it better to deliver in sideline? Should I not deliver at a hospital? Should I do a home birth? Should I go to a birth center? What's best for me? So that's why this research is really important.
What I found super interesting in this article is that they included 9 studies total, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're narrowing down very specific search terms in a systematic review, that is a number that is normal to end up with, because each of those studies had a sample size of at least 176 patients in it. So they had over, I think, 10,000 total participants. I'll clarify that number here in a second. But what they found was there was no significant difference in perineal tears of any degree or episiotomy between upright and supine / lithotomy, which, if you don't know what that is, that's laying on your back with your feet up in stirrups, kind of if you're thinking about like being at the gynecologist. This is in the abstract, so this is a short conclusion. We'll get into a little bit more of it. But their disclaimer is that the evidence is limited and heterogeneous. That is taking into account that every single one of the studies was from a different country, and every single study looked at one specific position against supine. But their overall conclusion, which I love, is that you should take into account each woman's specific risk factors, preferences, and comfort. And we love saying that in pelvic floor therapy because that's always the case. Usually when we're really getting nitty-gritty about the finite details of positioning, what am I doing with my foot in this one running form, it's always coming down to comfort. The placebo effect is very real with humans, so whatever you think is the most comfortable, best for your body is usually going to be the better outcome when we actually look at them in research. So I found that super interesting. So for those of you who don't know what a perineal tear is, do you want to describe it and maybe the different degrees?
Yeah, so layman's terms, what a perineal tear is pretty much a vaginal tear, and it can range in severity from a small little tear that requires no stitches to a more significant tear that can tear from vagina to the anus. Mm-hmm. So I think the research describes it a little bit more specific if you want to describe it.
Yeah, so in the article, they look at first degree as a category, second degree as a category, and then third and fourth degree as its own category. So first degree tears are defined as involving skin and mucosa. Second degree tears are involving perineal muscles. And third and fourth degree tears are involving the anal sphincter and rectal mucosa. And then episiotomy is its own category. And an episiotomy is an incision made surgically, it can be in the L&D room, to the vaginal wall so that they're basically forcing a tear to aid in delivery is the background of like why episiotomies exist. Reasoning for the episiotomies in this study were not given. They have that as a disclaimer. So they don't know why in the studies that included episiotomies, the episiotomy was given, whether it was position, difficulty pushing, position of the fetus, etc. So we don't have that information from this study.
What's your opinion on an episiotomy?
I don't love it. I think I wouldn't get one if given the option.
Nowadays, from what I've seen in the US, in Chicago, I have not seen episiotomies very often.
Yeah.
But more so in the past.
Episiotomies, I think, are a good example of a stepping stone in medical advancements where we were figuring stuff out, right? And we can say, oh, if we make this incision, we can aid in delivery and minimize the risk of a C-section. And now we do have birth prep, birthing positions, other options, right? On top of that, we've heard the horror stories of patients who were given episiotomies and they weren't told that they were getting one. Mm-hmm. And the doctor just chose that for them. I think that is obviously never okay. That's not a consensual operation. And I would call that an operation, even though it is like in a labor and delivery room and not an OR. But I think maybe there's a time and place in certain instances. They're not very common. And I don't think they minimize risk of anything bad happening anymore now that we have more research behind labor and delivery.
Yeah, I think it's an it depends situation, and more physicians I see here are opting more for a natural form of tearing where you just have a tear that occurs and the healing process is a little bit more smooth.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, one more definition from this study that I want to define is that they studied everyone in the second stage of labor. What's the second stage of labor? That is the pushing stage. So that's when you're actually delivering the baby. And then the study did not take into consideration whether the choice of anesthesia was there. So no epidurals. We don't know if the patients had epidurals or not in any of these studies. which is interesting. They basically said that that would be really hard to include because it would kind of create a whole nother outcome. And there's already such limited research on labor and delivery. So including that wasn't really an option for this review. So for this study, they had a total of 762 initial research articles, and 9 were ultimately selected, and this was a quantitative analysis, meta-analysis. The studies overall included 7,621 women. The countries included were United Kingdom, Ireland, Brazil, Pakistan, Mexico, Italy, China, and India. So they were all from a different country, which is interesting. And then the sample size from each study ranged from 127 to 3,236. So that's quite a big range. The positions evaluated, this gets really interesting, were vertical or upright in 4 randomized control trials, squatting or sitting in 4 studies, and quadruped in 1 study. So they only had 1 study on quadruped, which is that hands and knees position. In all the cases, they were compared against supine or lithotomy, which they're grouping into 1 category for this study. Notice how there's no sideline.
I was literally just going to say, is there not sideline?
Yeah, so they talk about that in their review at the end of the discussion, just saying there's not enough sideline research. But to my knowledge as a PT, that's the one position we actually have good research on for perineal tearing, or at least that's what I've been taught and told.
That's usually a position that, honestly, when patients say, what position would you want to deliver in? For me, I say sideline.
Me too.
It
But
feels the
why?
most comfortable to me.
Yeah.
And you get to face your partner if you wanted to. So that brings me more comfort. Me comfort. And someone can hold your leg. And I don't got to look at I don't got to look at anything going on.
Yeah.
I can just focus in and try to relax my pelvic floor.
Yeah. And then there's the factor that inside lying, the pelvic rotation is in such a way that there's a little bit more opening. The theory is that that can minimize the risk of tearing with delivery too and make for easier pushing because you're not pushing through as narrow of a canal.
Yeah, you get naturally pushed into some more hip internal rotation, which helps with opening the pelvic outlet.
Yeah.
Which is why I also like a hands and knees, because you can get into that hip internal rotation. And you also don't have pressure on your sacrum too, so you can help with helping the pelvic outlet to open up and the sacrum open up with delivery.
I would have really liked to see this study with at least 1 or 2 looking at side lying, because that would have been fascinating to me. The results were already fascinating. We'll get to that in a sec. They do address that blinding is not possible due to the nature of the intervention. Blinding is when the participant doesn't know what intervention they're getting. So obviously you can't do that in a labor and delivery sense consensually. But regardless, there was low risk of bias in this study. So getting into some results, we already said there was no significant difference between any of the positions and supine or lithotomy, but there were sub-analyses for each of them. So in their subgroup analysis, the greatest risk of type 1 perineal tears was observed in the hands and knees position. It changes for each position though.
You said type 1. Does that mean first degree?
First degree.
Okay.
It changes for each degree of tearing, which is where I'm like, we have to take all this with a grain of salt. And mind everyone, this is getting nitty-gritty beyond p-value, beyond clinical significance. So they already found it not clinically significant, but these are sub-analyses. They're looking at really specific parts of that. For type 1, the lowest risk was standing. So that was fascinating. For second-degree perineal tears, it was different. There were no significant differences once again, but in sub-analyses, the lowest risk was squatting and the highest risk was sitting.
Interesting.
For type 3 and 4 tears, again, no major significant differences, but in sub-analysis, the lowest risk, again, was squatting and the highest risk was standing. Supine is in the middle for all of these. It's never on one end or the other, except for episiotomies. The highest risk is supine and the lowest risk was sitting. So it's interesting.
So can we talk about, name all the ones that are listed as lowest risk from the sub-analyses?
Lowest risk from sub-analyses are standing for first-degree tears, squatting for second-degree tears, squatting for third and fourth degree tears, and hands and knees for episiotomies.
Okay. But let's talk about squatting and why that could be a lower risk
Okay.
in terms of a musculoskeletal PT perspective.
Yeah.
Because we do a lot of deep yogi squat, hip mobility, or sitting in a yogi squat, or holding on to rings or TRX bands and rocking in a low squat as a form of birth prep.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we do that is that increased hip flexion really does help to drop and relax the pelvic floor. It helps to cue people to breathe deeper into the pelvic floor too. And when people are holding on to something, you don't have to use your legs that much to stay sturdy. If you have someone holding you up too, you can really relax those muscles. So you don't have pressure on the sacrum either, which is nice. And then you can really get into some deep hip internal rotation mobility too to help open up the pelvic outlet. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. You know, I want to see a few different things. I want to see an article or a systematic review that takes into account side lying. I want to see some randomized control trials that take into account pelvic floor therapy and birth prep compared to these positions, because maybe it's a breathwork thing and not a position thing. Do we know that the position is making the bigger difference for the perineal tear, or is it the way we prep for birth? So that's what I want to see more of, I think, if we were to do this again. But again, no major significant difference. It is fascinating that in the sub-analyses, each position or each degree of tear had a different position that was low and high risk for it, which just tells you, and it says it's like heterogeneous. I think that's also what it's talking about, that all of these studies were so different. There was no consensus on any of them that there was one position that was superior to the rest for all types of tears across the board.
So I'm going to jump in here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opinions on the internet about how a woman needs to deliver a baby.
Yeah.
And it goes as far as there are people online saying, you should never deliver on your back. You should never deliver on your back. That's bad for you. Don't let your doctor talk you into it. If you want to deliver on your back, this study right here is saying no significant difference. If it's the position you are comfortable in, deliver on your back. If you're not comfortable being on hands and knees, don't deliver on hands and knees. The study is saying no significant difference, but taking into account patient comfort is one of the most important things, right?
And taking into account evidence is still limited. There might be a significant difference that we haven't found yet with this particular topic. But yes, they do advise take all of this with a grain of salt, exercise with caution, anything you're taking away from this study. I love this one line in particular. It says, therefore, the choice of birthing position should prioritize women's preferences and comfort while considering other important predictors of perineal trauma, such as parity, operative delivery, and episiotomy. That's exactly my takeaway from the article.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. That's exactly what we need. It also says, on the basis of these results, women can be guided to make informed decisions, taking into account their individual risk factors and how they may benefit from maternal positioning for perineal protection. This is a research study that really was for the women.
For the women.
For the women.
So, in general, when it comes to pelvic floor PT and birth prep, labor prep, we're going to teach you positions that we like and give you options. I'm never going to say, here's supine, don't ever do this. I'm going to say supine position is a position that is commonly done in hospitals. It's not the only option. I just want you to know that's not the only option, because a lot of people go to deliver babies and think, okay, I'm just going to listen exactly word for word what my physician says, what my nurses tell me to do, and I'm just going to do what they say. And usually they only present you with laying on your back. So pelvic floor PT is great because it can give you options, and we're going to give you reasonings why we like different positions, why we prefer them. We can try out some push prep in each position, see how it feels for you to be in that position. We'll do exercises in different positions and see how it feels to exert effort in these positions and see what feels more comfortable for you and your pregnant belly. And let's say you do think like, oh, I feel great pushing when I'm on hands and knees. I feel great doing a lot of exercise in hands on knees. Great. You can push for a little bit on hands and knees. You don't even have to deliver in that position though, if you don't want to, but you can push some in there. You can push some in there,
You
girl.
could push some in there. That was so good. Yes. And to your point, I think pelvic floor PT is such a valuable tool for people that want to try out different positions because you can spend time in them. I always tell my birth prep patients, like, especially if it's their first time delivering, would you go run a marathon without ever running before that?
No.
Delivering is such a physical effort. It's a huge trauma to the body. It just is. That's something, especially if you haven't experienced it before, prepping for it as much as you can and finding ways to make it as comfortable for you is going to put you in the best position for it.
I will say an opinion though.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
I think that there is a problem. There's a problem with hospital deliveries and such that you do not have a lot of room to move around. You're really confined to the bed, usually, especially if you get an epidural. They're not letting you out of that bed, girl. And that can limit, I think that hinders delivery outcomes.
And let's talk about maybe you're not, we all know those patients that would make it happen for themselves, right? They're like, okay, I'm in a hospital, but I am going to deliver how I want to. And I know how to advocate for myself to get myself there. I have been a practitioner for years and I cannot advocate for myself in a clinical setting. If anyone with the degree is looking at me telling me you got to stay in the bed, I'm going to zip my lips and I'm going to stay in the bed. That's how most people go into delivery. You're scared. You're ready to have a baby, but you're not. Your partner is probably being stupid and you're pissed at him. You don't know. You have all of these factors. You're about to shit yourself. You don't have the energy to advocate for yourself in that situation where all of this new stimulus is coming at you from left field. So of course you're going to be confined to the bed. And that's how it is. Even if there was more opportunity for it, I think the hospital limits in that way. Just being in a setting that's automatically like scary and clinical and medical, right?
Yes. I think a lot of patients that do come to PT for prep want an answer of what's the best way for me to deliver? How should I do it? Teach me how to do it. And then I'm going to do it this way. But PT, labor and delivery, everything, a lot of it depends, which you hear a lot as a PT. And your care is going to be so specific to you and your duration of PT, but also your labor experience is going to be so unpredictable and different. You're going to have a birth. Even if you have a birth plan and you have plan A, plan B, who knows? Rodney, the husband, might go to Sushi Taku right before because he's hungry and he's going to be running like, I'm hungry,
Rodney.
babe. I got to go get some sushi.
Oh, we're throwing Rodney under the bus.
Hold it in.
Okay, so yes.
And that'll piss you off.
A couple things there. Anything can go any which direction when push comes to shove. That's why PT is
push
also,
comes to shove.
Yeah, because it's pushing.
Yeah,
that's
good job.
Funny. PT, that's the same as any condition we would treat, right? You see a runner and then they go run their marathon. They might still sprain their ankle while they're running there. That's a bad running injury example. They might get that stress fracture while they're running the marathon anyway, right? But they have prepped for months with PT. Before that, they're going to recover so much better. If you came to PT and you're like, I don't want to have a perineal tear, and you still do, you're going to recover better after from still going to PT beforehand. In a similar fashion, if you come into PT and you say, I am someone who does really well with instruction. I like taking advice from the professional. Can you assess me? Tell me what my best position is. Your PT can do that for you. You know, they can still assess and say, based on what I'm finding, I would recommend maybe delivering in this position because you seem the most comfortable. You're best at breath work in that position. Your pushing is the best in that position. In this clinical setting, I can't guarantee it'll be that way in delivery, but that's my clinical impression of you. So it really comes down to, again, the individual needs of the patient. Sometimes it is do what feels right in the moment, and sometimes it's we can give you a little more guidance if you want it.
Sometimes maybe something is going wrong with delivery in a sense that baby isn't moving the right way or something's happening more medically. And in that sense, things are going to change too, where it doesn't become as much about patient comfort and it becomes, let's get this fucking baby out.
Yeah, sometimes it's a C-section. And honestly, a lot of the time it is. And we see that too.
And that's fine.
Because
even if you went to PT before expecting a vaginal delivery and you have a C-section, you're still going to recover faster if you went to PP before.
If you went to PP before. If you went to PT before.
PT, as in pelvic floor physical therapy.
For sure.
So
I really liked looking at this article.
I did too.
I think I like an article episode.
I do too.
All of our clinical impressions come from like evidence-based practice. So we're looking at research all the time, but we don't always talk about specific studies on the podcast. So if you have a topic and you're like, I want you to get into the research on that specific topic and tell me everything that is out there, we can find a systematic review on it and go over it.
Otherwise, if you guys don't give us research topics, we'll find the most recent ones. Because one thing we do complain about is there not being enough research in women's health. So we should be hunting for them when they come out, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And we're going to give them to you so you can hear them too.
Listen, when there's a new banger, when there's a new systematic review, I'm reading it.
When that new review hits.
When that new
When it
review
drops.
hits, that new drop, that new good.
Then we're going to bring it to your podcast listening station.
Absolutely. I love the contrast of last week's episode and this week's episode.
Yeah, because we're hot and we can do it both.
Find a girl who can do both.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Make sure you're following us on social media at The Pelvic Freak Show.
Y'all was crazy.
I say y'all sometimes.
I haven't heard you say that in a while.
I know. It's been a minute, right?
We should bring it back.
I'll bring it back, I think.
Sometimes I forget that I'm from Kentucky. I used to say y'all a lot. And then every now and then I'm like, I should say y'all here to remind people I'm from Kentucky.
Y'all was my original like agendered term for a group of people that I went towards. Like everyone, y'all, folks, you know.
Y'all folks, yeah.
Yeah, I don't say that together.
Oh.
I say y'all or
cool.
folks. But I'll use it more in writing than I do verbally. I would
Cool.
say.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway.
All right. Y'all come back now.
Make sure you're following us on social media at The Pelvic Freak Show.
And make sure you leave us a 5-star rating or review, please. If you have not, it helps so much.
It helps so much. Bye, Pelvic Freaks.
Bye, Pelvic Freaks.